the newsagents.
From fundraisers, from donors, from ordinary delegates, from volunteers, from more or less anyone in Chicago, the one word I keep hearing again and again is giddy. The Democratic Party seems giddy with the money that's flowing in, the enthusiasm, the volunteers saying they want to hit the phones and knock on people's doors. There has been a transformation that is profound.
But there's another word other than giddy that you could use to describe what is about to happen at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. And it's a much uglier word, a word that the Democrats would not ever like to use about themselves. And that word is hypocrisy. Because on Monday night, pretty much to open the convention, the ghost at the feast will turn up. That is President Biden, whose convention this was supposed to be. The hypocrisy comes from the fact the Democrats will still not accept that they forced him out. They're still saying it was his decision, and of course it wasn't. Welcome to the newsagents.
It's John.
It's Lewis.
And if you go into the arena where the convention is being held, and we're just sort of kind of outside in the kind of common area, and we just walk through a door and then we're into the arena itself.
Just by the bins, actually, we are the newsagents. They've given us the absolute prime spot, the DNC.
Next to the trash.
It's a very important place to be.
We might be taken out with the trash if we stay here too long. And the fact of the matter is, this whole convention was designed for Joe Biden to be the main speaker on Thursday night to receive his party's nomination and acclamation as the presidential candidate for November. Instead of which, he is opening the convention, and it is going to be probably his last big public outing before he leaves the political stage after half a century, after a bloodletting that went on, which the Democratic Party seems to be in denial about.
Yeah, there is this extraordinary juxtaposition between the excitement and the what could have been, because what this could have been, and I think this is where the excitement and giddiness comes from for the Democrats, right, is that they are aware that had it not been for the events of a month ago, this would have been a bloodbath. This wouldn't have been a coronation. This wouldn't have been the excitement and the thrill of the first party in American history to nominate a woman of colour for the presidency. It would have been about the internecine civil war that was still raging about whether or not Joe Biden should have been the nominee. And there are little reminders of that everywhere here, right? Like, for example, people have seen maybe on TV before at conventions, each state delegation has a little sign that they sort of hold aloft in the air just to say where they can sit at the convention. Which two states are next to the stage at this convention? It's Delaware and Pennsylvania, just to the right of the stage. That is a little thing that is normally reserved for the party nominee. You go to the merchandise store, right? Normally that would be full of merch from everything. There's just a few T-shirts, a few key rings, whatever, because they haven't even, you sort of imagine they haven't printed this stuff or made this stuff to replace it from Biden-Harris to Harris-Waltz. So there are little memories everywhere of what would have been and what would have been and could have been until very recently. And tonight, on the first night of the convention, as we were saying, it is Biden's night, but not the night he ever thought he would have had.
My guess is that when he speaks tonight, it will be it will be pure schmaltz. It will be syrupy. It will be feel good. Everyone will be emoting, "We love you, Joe," which I think will be a pretty sincere emotion. I think he is held in very high esteem.
Well, it's the end. It's 50 years of a career, right, that he's basically bowing out tonight.
So he's bowing out tonight, and they will be saying, "Oh, we love you, Joe. We love you so much. You've been a great servant." But it was such a conditional love. The love was conditional on you getting out of the way. The love was conditional on you saying you were not going to stand. The love was conditional on just, "Please, Joe, you're too old. Go off quietly." And I bet you there is a rage within Joe Biden as well tonight of that hypocrisy. But he knows the political game. And, I think it's epitomised in the relationship with Nancy Pelosi, whom we interviewed on the podcast last week, where she says she has not spoken to him since her intervention, which was so decisive in forcing him out. And apparently there's absolute fury, the feelings of betrayal that are there. And so, yeah, there is giddiness, there is hope, there is optimism, there is a belief that they can win in November. But they've also done it, in a pretty brutal way.
Well, tonight and the start of this convention is going to be about an effort from the Democrats to show that the generational torch is being passed, and that it is being done seamlessly, and it is being done without conflict. And it is absolutely true to say that, again, by comparison to what could have been, this is a party which is showing order, which is showing discipline, which is showing message discipline, and so on. And we can talk about where the race actually is now, which is the really important thing. But we should just say, I mean, one of the things that is often accused by the Republicans about the Democrats, of the Democrats, is this sense of sort of hypocrisy and all of this. I mean, there is this hypocrisy, right? Let's make no mistake about it. When you are seeing, as we're going to see throughout the course of today, particularly as Biden warms up to his speech, these valedictory kind of huge praise, and as you say, John Schmaltz say, the selfless decision of Joe Biden, he made such a wonderful decision to do that, that just shows what sort of man he is. Oh, come on. Like, come on. We all know the truth, right? The Democrats, actually, the truth is, it was true that people at a senior level around Joe Biden were basically concealing the true state of his cognitive decline. That's number one. And then second hypocrisy, second lie, the truth is the Democrats forced him out. It wasn't a selfless decision. It wasn't the decision Biden wanted to make. It was one that was forced upon him in an actually completely unprecedented way in American political history, pretty much. That is the truth here. So for all the schmaltz and the hubris around this with the Democrats, the truth is they forced him out, and they're lying about it, or there's a hypocrisy to it at the very least.
And the very odd thing is that a lot of the people that are now lauding and venerating Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party were the same people who 6 months ago or a year ago were expressing serious doubts about her, whether she was a weight on the ticket rather than a boost to the ticket, doubting her credentials as vice president and not feeling that she was doing a great job. But you've got to say that since the moment that Biden pulled out, she has not put a foot wrong, and she has been effective in messaging. The word we've used on previous podcasts is that she's created these fantastic vibes, and she's also taking the fight to Donald Trump. And yesterday, no mistake, she was in Western Pennsylvania, I think probably the crucible state of this presidential election, where it's absolutely critical to win it. And she was contrasting herself and the Democratic Party with Donald Trump.
And that's what this campaign is about. This campaign is about a recognition that, frankly, over the last several years, there's been this kind of perversion that has taken place, I think, which is to suggest that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, when what we know is the real and true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. Yeah. That's what we see as strength. We know what strength looks like. That's what strength looks like. Anybody who's about beating down other people is a coward.
Yeah, and no surprise at all as well that where is Donald Trump campaigning today? He's going to be in Pennsylvania along with J.D. Vance. So the thing about the vice presidency, as we were saying yesterday, is a weird office because you are famous but unknown. It's almost built into how it's got to be. So as we were saying yesterday, this is about not only a transitional moment between leaders for the Democrats, but it's a moment of introduction for her. And there are going to be 50,000 people arriving this week, including 4,000 delegates. Do you know the theme of this convention?
Take me through the themes.
Is it going to be really tangible? Every day has got a theme. Yeah. Oh no, it's very descriptive. Yeah. So the theme for the convention overall is "For the people, for our future." It's got Nancy Pelosi written all over there. All it needs is for the children as well to put on there. Each day has got a particular theme. Monday
Wouldn't it have been fun though if the slogan had been "For the few, for our past"?
Yeah, exactly. Mondays is "For the people." Well, they do say, in politics, if you can reverse it, a political slogan has to be meaningless and you can reverse it. And so if you can't reverse it, so Monday's for the people, not for the people. Tuesday, a bold vision for America's future. A boring, turgid vision for America's past. Wednesday, a fight for our freedom.
Yeah.
A retreat from our restraints. And Thursday, for our future again. So this is what we've got to look forward to throughout the course of the week.
But it's, as you say, it is a chance for the Democrats to introduce Kamala Harris to the people. Yes, she's been vice president for 3.5 years, but there are huge numbers of people who really don't know much about her, who haven't thought much about her. Can I envisage her as our next commander-in-chief? And that brings you to how Trump is playing all of this. And we've talked a bit about Donald Trump's kind of missteps and not quite sure how to portray her. And you can see the problem that Donald Trump still gets into and still creates these great messes. And he was on stage the other day with Miriam Adelson, who he had given the Presidential Medal of Freedom to. Now, what great thing had Miriam Adelson done to deserve the highest award that the president can bestow? She'd given a huge sum of money to Donald Trump. On stage, Donald Trump says, that's so much better than the Congressional Medal of Honor, because you only get that if you're a soldier and are nearly dead or dead. Have a listen to this.
I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor, that's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. And they're rated equal.
And so Donald Trump and Republicans are having to clear up that mess, like saying, you're a bit of a loser if you've been shot in war and you've died, and, much better to get a kind of the presidential medal, which I can give out. The other thing is, on stage at a similar rally, he went on about how he is better looking than his rival Kamala Harris.
She said Kamala has one big advantage. She's a very beautiful woman. She's a beautiful woman. So I decided to go back and reread the clause. I'm not saying he's not, but I say that I am much better looking than her. I think I'm much better. Much better. I'm a better looking person than Kamala. No, I couldn't believe it. She said, I had never heard that one. They said, no, her biggest advantage is that she's a beautiful woman. I'm going, I never thought of that. I'm better looking than she is.
Well, he's not wrong, is he? I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, he's a very handsome man.
Handsome 78-year-old.
Very handsome man, getting better with age. Look, I think this is reveals or adverts to this sort of profound frustration, right, that there is in Republican circles and at the top of the Republican Party, and even with Trump's allies as well. I mean, you saw that even with someone like Lindsey Graham, who is a senator, who has been a staunch supporter of the former president, basically saying at the weekend, saying on Sunday that Trump, the candidate who he believes has the best ideas, can win, but Trump, the showman, could lose because he can't help himself but go into these flights of fancy and lose message discipline, right? Like, actually, they had quite an effective message over the weekend, an economic message, because Kamala Harris had started to put flesh on the bone, as will be seen this week with the party platform, in terms of what she wants to do on economic policy. And it is a big question for her. Is she continuity Biden? How progressive is she? All of this. And in particular, she alighted on a set of proposals around what the Americans would call price gouging. Price gouging basically sort of shops sort of having inflation-busting price increases to profiteer, what we'd probably call profiteering. And, this is a pretty flimsy proposal at best. How is the federal government going to enforce that? At what point does the percentage increase kick in? Actually, you can argue that will actually make inflation worse for all sorts of reasons we don't need to get into. Trump comes along and calls her a communist and says that, she's Comrade Kamala. Like, we might think this is a bit puerile, but it's not a bad political message at all in a country like this, which has a particular view of how the free market should operate. But that gets completely set aside and pushed aside. Why? Because Trump ends up talking about whether or not he's better looking than she is, right? And we all know that he can be effective in terms of he can be surprising, he can be funny, and sometimes people like that. But the message indiscipline in a period in which they are struggling to find a calibration to respond to the Harris nomination is really costing them.
I tell you the thing I've noticed, which is in marked contrast to 2016 and 2020, is that someone in the Trump campaign has clearly confiscated his phone or changed the code on it, because what you're seeing on Twitter now, the Trump is very active. It's not him. They are memes, they are slogans, they are little video clips. There's not him writing in caps lock, raging about this with spelling mistakes and grammar errors and all the rest of it. It doesn't have any of the danger that Trump had last time, but it doesn't have any of the authenticity either, where you thought, God, we're really getting to feel what Donald Trump really thinks about X or Y or Z. And I think that is a sign just how worried the campaign are about Trump going his own way on these things. But on the women issue, he is picking a fight that he is losing. The fact of the matter is that the polling evidence that there is, and the state of the race shows that it has been transformed by Joe Biden going, is that among women, the Democrats are like 14 points ahead. Why? The overturning of Roe versus Wade. The fact that we are in the post-Me Too movement, which was not the case in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. The other thing, of course, is that you have got Trump and J.D. Vance on the Republican ticket, Trump who can't help himself making disparaging comments about women, and J.D. Vance talking about childless cat women. And I think that this is having a huge galvanising effect among half the population who vote in higher numbers than the male population.
It's almost like taking on half of the population isn't an ideal strategy in a democratic election, is it? But we should talk a little bit about the state of the race, because for all of the giddiness, actually, the electoral map is still
exactly what they'll do.
Not looking perhaps as good as the Democrats might think, given the vibes that they've had. We'll talk about that next. Well, welcome back to Chicago. By the way, if you can hear some excitable noise in the background.
That's your fan club
It's
that you brought in, isn't it?
It is. Hi, girls. No, it's not. It is. We're surrounded by a lot of other stores doing sort of early morning broadcasts, including our friends over there at Sirius XM, of which, of course, we're both big fans. So, if that is
that's Sirius, as in a cloud, rather than serious.
Yes, I think it's fair to say it's not the latter. So if that's what you can hear, that is. If you can hear anything in the background, that is what it is.
Let's talk a bit about the race, because there's a ton of polls out there, and you kind of have to try and sift and try and take an overview from kind of 30,000 feet of where we are. Look, the race is still tight, but handily, the last set of New York Times Siena polls for the key swing states in the Midwest of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania and Michigan showed Kamala Harris 4 points ahead. And then you've got a series of other states as well that Trump was way, way out in front before Biden left the race, like North Carolina, where Kamala Harris is now a bit ahead, Arizona, where Kamala Harris is doing very well, and where the race has tightened enormously with Trump still ahead in very excitable on Sirius XM.
Well, it's because you're very good. They don't hear stuff like this very often.
And in Nevada and Georgia, the race has tightened considerably. So those are a lot of states to be fighting over.
Two things to be true at once here, right? Which is that you can understand why the Democrats are giddy in electoral terms, because this has gone from, we can see this from all of the polling and the electoral map, this has gone from a hopeless race to a competitive race. Biden was done. That's why they got rid of him. Despite the hypocrisy, that's why they got rid of him. And what Harris has managed to do in actually remarkably little time, and it is really impressive, and I don't think any of us would have predicted it, what she's managed to do is almost automatically reassemble a lot of, although not all of, the Biden winning 2020 coalition. Like Biden, who was Biden struggling most with in the run-up to his defenestration? He was struggling with young voters because of Gaza. He was struggling with black voters. He was struggling with Latino voters. According to all of the polling, probably to the tune of about 80% or so, Harris has basically, at a stroke, managed to bring a lot of those people back into play and back into the Democratic column. But that is the point, right? In the sense that it is not that Harris is making enormous advances by comparison to where, say, Biden was in 2020. It is that she has reassembled much of that coalition, but not all of it. So she is still polling below where Biden was, even with black voters in 2020. And that is why, although the electoral map is expanding again and is looking more favourable just about to the Democrats, and momentum is taking her a long way, the truth is, in most of these key states, like Georgia or Arizona or in the Sun Belt or wherever it happens to be, these races are statistical dead heats. So if you are listening to this sort of great sense of, she's back in play and momentum, yes, it's true, she's back in play, but she's only back in play. This remains a highly competitive election, and although there is very little time to go, i.e. 80 days, there's still 80 days to go. And look what has happened in the last 30 days.
I think that's so true, and I think that, there is so much about this election cycle that is utterly extraordinary, and you cannot compare it, I don't think, to anything in American history, where in the last few weeks you have had the most catastrophic TV debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. You have had an attempted assassination of Donald Trump. You have had the Republican convention. You have had Joe Biden pulling out. It has gone on and on and on. It has been mad, utterly mad. But there are some things that are constant, and that is what we were talking about earlier, the debate over the economy. That is going to be absolutely central. You know, once people have gone past giddy, we're back in the race, there's a race back on. They've got to win the race. And that is still the challenge for them. And I think that it will go back to pocketbook issues like, you know, how much it costs to fill your grocery trolley up, how much it costs to fill the car up with petrol, all those sort of issues. Are you better off now than you were? Those questions will come to the fore, and that is where Kamala Harris needs to have a good message, a clear message, a message that she can, you know, withstand criticism and attack, because the Republicans are going to come after her. The Republicans are not going to give up the fight.
No, indeed. And actually, again, if you drill down to the polling, Trump is still ahead to the tune of about 10 to 12 points on the economy.
Yes.
And ultimately, this is an election for all, I mean, as you say, John, for all that we often internationalise an American presidential election, because uniquely within the democratic world, really, it has unique, profound implications for the whole globe, particularly for the West. You know, ultimately, if you're sat in Ohio, if you're sat in Pennsylvania or Michigan or wherever it happens to be, and prices which have gone up during the Biden presidency by 20%. Now, you can have a long argument about who is to blame for that, and actually whether Biden made it better or worse. But the truth is, it's happened on Biden's watch, just as many of the catastrophes which happened on the Trump's watch happened on the Trump's watch, and the Democrats made great hay of it in 2020. And voters do not believe, to some extent I think a bit unfairly, but voters generally do not believe that the Biden administration, or the Harris administration, as J.D. Vance and Trump have now started to call it, has done a good job on domestic economic pressures and economic issues. So if this election ends up being about the economy, then you would have to say that Trump still remains favoured if he can stay on message. And also Harris, as we were saying before, has to walk that dance, delicate dance, of how to take the best of the Biden years in terms of the economy, things in terms of limited reindustrialization, massive investment programs and so on, but also try and determine and give an indication as to how, if at all, she is going to be different. And that's difficult politically.
Of course, because the last thing she can do is to say, yeah, what Biden did for 3.5 years was an aberration, because she was the vice president who was out there selling the Biden message. But equally, she can't just be continuity Biden, because then kind of what's the difference? And I think that
Biden with full sentences.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that there is a danger there as well. She's got to define herself. I think she is going to put in sunlight. I think there are going to be different areas of stress. I think the economic policy will be different from what Biden advanced. I think that foreign policy will be really interesting to watch in terms of Israel, Gaza, and whether she puts more distance, you know, is less pro-Israeli than Biden was.
So the platform came out on Sunday night, and this is, I mean, something else that we're braced for today is the descent on Chicago of thousands and thousands and thousands of Gaza protesters who have, you know, talked about Genocide Joe, blame Biden, but who are also...
And Killer Kamala.
And Killer Kamala is the new line that they're talking about. And this is probably going to be intensified today because the DNC party platform for the presidential election came out last night, mentioned Trump over 50 times, as you might imagine, lots on different sort of policies here and there. But crucially on Israel, did not, as some people wanted within the Democratic Party, call for a reduction or withdrawal of arms investments and military support to Israel. So the Democratic Party is not going into this election fundamentally with any different position on Israel by comparison to Biden. And that's probably going to intensify the protests today. But also there is a suggestion as well that there may be even some disruption in the hall, because there are delegates who are official delegates. They can't be denied entry because they're delegates to the Democratic Party. And there is a suggestion that some of them might try and cause a bit of disruption, maybe not to the Harris speech, but throughout the course of the week to other speakers.
Yes, we've got to be alert to that. And I think that what the Democratic Party is hoping for is that people have their First Amendment rights to protest, to disagree, and all the rest of it. But what they don't want is for images to come out of Chicago of tear gas, police batons, them charging a crowd, and that giving the impression that it was lawlessness in Chicago. So it kind of feels at the moment that we've got Donald Trump, comrade Kamala, we've got the pro-Gaza people, killer Kamala, but I think for the overwhelming majority of the Democratic Party is content Kamala, because they feel happy at the place they're in right now. So we have an agenda of sorts for the week. We know when keynote speakers are going to be on, and Lewis has taken us through very elegantly all those meaningful titles of what each day's theme are. So, today we've got Joe Biden, Jill Biden, Hillary Clinton. Tomorrow we've got the Obamas speaking. Wednesday it's Tim Walz, the running mate, and then Thursday night the culmination of Kamala Harris. Am I missing anyone out?
Nancy Pelosi also speaking on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Pete Buttigieg, the Transportation Secretary. Harris. And then the rest. I mean, what it reminds us is, I was looking through that list, and again, the sort of comparison with the RNC, right, in the sense that, or the Republican National Convention, because what you still have is, like we were saying on the show yesterday, the Democratic Party is still fundamentally dominated by its elites. It being, as I was saying yesterday, a machine party, right? And so that's why you have this almost extraordinary list of basically sort of Democratic Party luminaries, past and present, going all the way back to the Clinton years, right, which is 30 years ago, all sort of coming together. Again, the RNC, there's no Bush there. There was no, the last living Republican president or anyone associated with the administration. This is a party that's completely transformed, right? Whereas this is one trying to suggest there is a basic sort of through line, a thread of continuity. I mean, you wouldn't get that with the Labour Party either, right? If you think about Britain either, you wouldn't be able to get Jeremy Corbyn, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, the whole Ed Miller band. You would never get them all speaking on the same event throughout the same week. This is a party which fundamentally is one of remarkable discipline, really, and sort of order and rigidity to it in a way that does not exist with the Republican Party anymore.
But we have only spoken about who is legitimately on the agenda for speaking. There is wild speculation about who might be pitching up to do a little turn at our convention.
Is that Maitlis?
Maitlis hasn't been mentioned, although she could be parachuted in.
They couldn't afford her.
I mean, okay, so let me give you the three names that are in the frame. Emily Maitlis.
Yeah.
Woman called Beyonce.
Yeah.
And there's Taylor somebody or other. Taylor Swift.
Well, Emily is obviously a very big Republican, so they wouldn't be having her here.
She'll see you.
Yeah. Taylor Swift, yeah. Well, that'd be, yeah.
That would be something.
Isn't
wouldn't
she
it?
in Britain? Isn't she in London?
Doing her Eras tour at Wembley. Look,
be a lot of very disappointed Swifties if she turned up here.
The weird thing is that if none of those people are going to turn up, if you're not going to get Maitlis, Beyonce or Swift, then surely the thing you do is you say, no, this is all bullshit. None of this is going to happen. You're all making it up. The Democratic Party are letting this run a bit in terms of speculation. And if nobody does turn up and you've kind of got someone who, does a set at the piano bar between 9 and 11 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in Chicago, and that's all they get.
Imagine if it's Hulk Hogan again. If the money's right.
So imagine if... So the Democratic Party are letting this story run that someone big is going to turn up. We will watch with interest.
They do have better celebs, the Dems, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean, it has to be said.
But it's sort of true of Labour as well, isn't it? I mean, Conservative Party used to get Jim Davidson and Cilla Black.
I'd love if Cilla turned up tonight. The ghost of Cilla. Oh, that'd be a surprise.
What's your name and where'd you come from?
And here's our Graham.
We'll be back tomorrow. See you then. Bye-bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.